and you see how 2023 has started. Your initial thoughts, please.
Yeah, the new government is maybe the most extremist in the history of the Zionist entity, which is really saying something. This is an entity that has done so many completely outlandish and crazy things. It's been committing terrorism as a matter of policy since even before it declared itself a state. And it's, I won't go into the long list of atrocities, including atrocities against the United States of America, the Liberty Incident, 9/11, Operation Susanna, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the main violence has, of course, always targeted the Palestinians because the Zionist entity, by definition, is trying to eliminate the Palestinians. So it's essentially a genocidal project. And they've usually tried to have a public relations front that makes themselves look like some sort of liberal Western democracy rather than an ongoing act of genocide. Now the mask is coming off. Netanyahu has brought people like Ben-Gvir into his cabinet. These are fanatical, basically, worshippers of mass murder. Ben-Gvir used to bow down to a holy icon of Baruch Goldstein, the killer of Muslims praying. And so it's obviously reaching the point now that they're basically admitting what they're doing. They're trying to finish the job that they decide even the liberals believe they should have finished the job in 1948. And so the year has started with an uptick in Israeli killings of Palestinians, and already this month there's more than a month's worth of people, like they're killing a clip of more than one a day. So it's not surprising that Palestinians are going to fight back. I mean, if you lost your loved ones to this kind of genocidal ongoing massacre, you probably would fight back too. And it looks like a very sad and bloody year is about to get even worse.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett. And Mr. Bruce Katz, welcome to the program. So I hope you're doing safe and well out there in Montreal. We see a lot of condemnation when it comes to the synagogue attack, Mr. Katz, but we hear very little about the women and children. Some of these kids are just throwing rocks at jeeps that pass by, and often they're throwing rocks at settlers that are there to expand settlements. It's going to be a big thing, obviously, we've heard under Netanyahu's new cabinet. But yet we don't hear anything about the attacks on the Palestinians throughout all of 2022.
I'm having a great deal of difficulty hearing you because there are a lot of voices in the background. I was not able to make out your question, so perhaps you could repeat it.
Okay, in a nutshell, basically with the synagogue attack today, just a few hours ago, we're hearing a lot of blowback by Western media and Western governments, but we have heard little or nothing about the plight of Palestinians, especially the near dozen or so that got killed yesterday in Nablus and the occupied West Bank, the Jenin refugee camp. Why is there such lopsided coverage and lopsided condemnation these days when it comes to this issue?
There's no surprise there when you consider that the Western media, the narrative, which is a contrived narrative on the part of the Western media, has for decades now been one of systematically suppressing the reality on the ground, the brutal treatment of the Palestinians and the Bedouin, I might add, at the hands of Israel's apartheid regime, whereby the Israeli forces can massacre Palestinians in cold blood. This is virtually never seen on any television screen. I'll speak for Canada, where Canadian corporate media, and in that I include the so-called public media, the CBC and the French equivalent Radio Canada, in the same bag. However, if one Israeli Jew is killed, you will see it repeated over and over again on the very same media that suppresses the Palestinian reality. Now, what this means is that in such a situation where, under international law, apartheid is a crime against humanity, and there are obviously instances of war crimes and even crimes against humanity affected by the Israeli apartheid regime against Palestinians and Bedouin. What this means is that the corporate media and those politicians who unconditionally support Israeli apartheid are complicit with a crime against humanity. So the fact that this is not being seen, basically not being covered by Western media, is not surprising. The narrative that the Israeli Hasbara or propaganda department puts forward, especially I'm referring especially to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance bogus definition of anti-Semitism, which conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. Let me give you a concrete example of the hypocritical narrative that is heard and seen everywhere in the West. Just recently, Joseph Borrell, who is a high-ranking spokesperson for the European Union, went on record stating on behalf of the European Union that calling Israel an apartheid state is tantamount to anti-Semitism, which means that Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, Amnesty International are all anti-Semitic organizations because they've shown without any doubt whatsoever that Israel is an apartheid state. So when you have individuals and you have governments and organizations that repeat this same false narrative over and over again, you understand that if Israel can act with the impunity with which it acts, the criminal impunity with which it acts, that is because the West has given it that impunity and continues to provide it with that impunity. So again, there's no surprise in the way this is being covered in Western media.
Thank you, sir. And Dr. Barrett, Antony Blinken supposedly, this current White House is very concerned about this new Netanyahu cabinet. We saw the White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan out there a couple weeks ago. Antony Blinken is on his way out there, according to the Times of Israel. A U.S. official told the Times that earlier this month, high-level meetings are in quick succession are aimed at gaining an understanding of the government's plans vis-a-vis the West Bank, while making clear the administration's red lines on issues relating to Palestinians, including the importance of maintaining calm at the al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Is this just show, and if it's not, how far do you think this administration and the White House can go to basically have some kind of impact on the fate of Palestinians right now? Or do the Israelis ever even listen to any U.S. officials when it comes to the plight of Palestinians and how they deal with them? So how much of an impact do you think Antony Blinken's visit is going to have?
Well, today the Zionists have so much power in the United States that the job of the White House has become to run interference for the Zionist genocide of Palestine. And the thing is that it's easier for them to run interference with that genocide when it's happening in slow motion and when it's deniable. But if it breaks out and becomes it's so obvious to the world, then suddenly it becomes much harder for the White House to do its job, as it's basically a bunch of PR flags for genocide. So they're just trying to make it easier for themselves to do their job by trying to whitewash what's really going on in occupied Palestine. And now with this ultra-extremist new Israeli government, that makes their job harder. So they're basically trying to tell the Israelis to cool it. We're providing you with all the coverage, the favorable coverage in our media that you need, and we're running interference for you in the U.S. government, and we will veto any UN resolutions against you, as we have hundreds of others in the past. But you guys have to behave in such a way that we can get away with that. And so there is an actual conflict, but unfortunately it's not a conflict between the Zionist criminals and an actually legitimate and fully sovereign American government, because the American government is no longer sovereign. It has been taken over by Zionists in a series of ongoing coups d'etat, beginning with the assassination of President Kennedy. That was all about Kennedy wanted to put an end to the Israeli nuclear program, and Ben-Gurion saw that as an existential issue. They had a furious exchange of letters. Ben-Gurion resigned 6 months before Kennedy was killed and organized that assassination, along with his American assets in the CIA. And then, of course, the Israelis have repeatedly attacked America ever since, especially on 9/11, which was a neoconservative Israeli false flag operation designed to hijack the American military on behalf of Israel and destroy Israel's regional enemies. So Israel has taken over the United States government. And Anthony Blinken is a Jewish Zionist who knows that his job is to run interference for Zionism. But he knows that it's hard to do when the Israelis suddenly, empower these lunatics like Ben-Gvir. So that's the real conflict. It's a conflict between the deniable genocide perpetrators and the out of the closet, mask off the face genocide perpetrators. And we'll see whether that conflict actually becomes something that leads to a break between the two sides. But I doubt it. The so-called liberal Zionist media here in the West is completely whitewashing what's going on right now. These people pretend to be disgusted with the extreme genocidalists like Ben-Gvir and indeed Netanyahu, but they continue to massively over-publicize every Israeli death. Jewish life is sacred, and every Palestinian deaths, that doesn't matter. They're goyim, they're lesser beings. They're just like beasts. That's essentially the ingrown the attitude that is deep in the bones of the people who run the United States, its media, its financial sector, and its government.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett. We don't have much time left, but Mr. Katz, I want to get this last question out to you. We're seeing, and we've seen for quite some time, a huge disconnect with the population in occupied territories, the Palestinian population, and the Palestinian Authority, especially with this young, with the youth in Nablus and Jenin. They feel like they're really disenfranchised when it comes to the PA, the aging Palestinian leadership there in that area. Why?
Well, let me state it categorically and unequivocally. The Palestinian Authority was created through the Oslo process. This was a flawed process, basically the selling out of the Palestinian liberation movement. Mahmoud Abbas was one of the architects of it, and the Palestinian Authority has existed since then, still continues to exist as Israel's subcontractor for maintaining the occupation in the West Bank. That is its role. So when you hear Mahmoud Abbas state, which is essentially an empty rhetorical statement about putting an end to the security agreement with Israel, that is meaningless. And I'm convinced that basically the requisite amount of money given over to the Palestinian Authority will very quickly change the statement. What is happening here, I think, is the fact that young Palestinians are sick and tired of having the Israeli boot on their throats, and that rather than lie down and die quietly, which is what I think Israel and the West essentially are agreed upon, they've decided to take up a force of arms, which is, by the way, their right under international law. Under international law, a civilian population which is under an illegal military occupation has a full right to bear arms against their oppressors and against the military forces occupying their territory. So Palestinians have the right to defend themselves. Young Palestinians understand this. They are actually applying it in real time. And I think that what we're witnessing is the initial onset of a third intifada.
All right, gentlemen, stay safe, both of you. Thank you both for joining us on the program. Mr. Bruce Katz, co-president at Palestinian and Jewish Unity, joining us from Montreal, and Dr. Kevin Barrett, editor at Veterans Today, joining us out of Madison, Wisconsin. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.